At Project Connect Nashville, we work to break the poverty cycle in individuals' lives through relationships, resources, and education in partnership with the local church. I'll talk more about those things, relationships, resources, and education, and the important role of the church in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about poverty. Poverty is one of the biggest challenges in our society today. And while a lack of money is certainly a major issue, it's also important to understand that poverty is a much more complex problem than simply a lack of material resources. At Project Connect, we more broadly define poverty as broken relationships. Broken relationships to God, self, others, and the rest of creation. When we understand and address poverty in that way, we realize that we all have poverty and brokenness in our own lives that has affected us and often still affects us deeply. And through that, we also know that the answer to poverty in our society is not simply more resources, but that it's the healing of all those broken relationships. And as Christians, we know the healer of broken relationships. Through our faith in Jesus, we're reconciled to God, and our broken relationship to Him is restored. And that is the foundation from which we live. But Jesus didn't come to simply reconcile us individually to God. Colossians 1 tells us that Jesus came to reconcile all things to Himself, and that includes our relationships to ourselves, each other, and the rest of creation. So God is at work in the world, restoring right relationships across all those areas of our lives. So what does this mean for poverty alleviation? It means that a more holistic understanding and solution is necessary to truly address the issue. While we can all understand poverty when viewed as broken relationships, it's also important to understand that material poverty has a unique set of challenges that many of us don't fully understand unless we've lived it. At Project Connect, we have an illustration that explores these broken relationships even further to expose the complex nature of poverty in our society. The poverty wheel shows us 8 key areas, or broken relationships, in the lives of those who are in material poverty. These broken relationships include finances, transportation, living wage jobs, housing, healthcare, education, family, and finally, the church. The difficult thing about poverty is that none of these 8 areas are independent of each other. They all impact each other and create a complex web of problems that are hard to overcome. When an individual is living in material poverty, we may say that he simply needs to get a better job or budget more effectively. Getting a better job sounds great, but barriers, including a criminal background, often as a result of broken family relationships, and a lack of good education or lack of stable housing or good transportation make that difficult. So let's consider more the broken relationship to transportation just for a minute. Most individuals living in poverty have to rely on public transportation, and this greatly narrows their options for employment if they want to have a short commute. The other options add the cost of time to get to and from work. The Nashville map is like a wagon wheel. And while someone may live near Gallatin Road and have a job 4 miles away on Lebanon Road, it's an hour-and-a-half commute each way because they have to go down Gallatin Road to get downtown and back out on Lebanon Road in order to get to work. So let's say that individual is willing to spend that time commuting, an hour-and-a-half each way. And they make $12 an hour at their job, so roughly $2,000 a month. The average cost of rent in Nashville has doubled in the past decade. It's up to $1,400 a month, and wages haven't kept up. So when income is $2,000 a month and rent is $1,400 a month, people can't budget their way to a solution. We must help folks heal the broken relationships to living wage jobs, affordable housing, and finance and budgeting skills. But there's more. Getting a job is actually easier than keeping a job. Consider the broken relationship to healthcare. If our friend has health issues and needs regular doctor visits, it's going to make it hard to keep their job because transportation to and from those appointments will mean have to hold days off just to visit the doctor. That will result in reduced income or possibly even job loss. Another huge factor is the impact of mental illness or trauma from childhood that continues to affect how we respond to the world. Messages of defeat or a sense of hopelessness lead to job loss. If you've had a teacher that told you you were dumb or experienced abuse or neglect as a child, That will affect how you hear constructive criticism from your boss, and it will certainly affect your ability to trust authority. So, to numb the past pain of hurt, many fall into addiction and/or unhealthy romantic relationships, which often, again, leads to job loss. So this perpetuates the cycle even more. So as you see, a broken relationship to finances comes from a broken relationship to living wage jobs, which is compounded by broken relationships to transportation and housing, healthcare, and family. And our broken relationships to family often cause all of us the deepest pain we have. And when compounded with all those other challenges, that pain often leads to job loss and back to broken relationship to finances. Do you feel overwhelmed by all of this? Or defeated? If so, that's okay. That's honestly what we're trying to communicate. This is messy and this is hard. It's complex and we can't just solve it. At least we can't on our own. Jesus is the healer and restorer of broken relationships. And all of this is insurmountable without His intervention. It's overwhelming, but He is at work in the world and in our lives. And the beautiful thing is that He chooses to use us in the restoration process. So the last thing I want to talk about is the church. We've seen that Jesus came to restore broken relationships to all of these areas, and we as His church are to be agents of that restoration. But many churches, out of a good desire to be good stewards of resources, have used benevolence techniques that actually push people away rather than draw them in. If we say we'll pay someone's electric bill only once per year, the message often heard is, "Here, we'll help you now, but don't come back for a year." The goal of healthy benevolence is to use resources to build relationship and to share the good news of Jesus and invite people into our fellowship. That is what the church is. We know the healer of broken relationships, so let's share that good news. What does all of this have to do with Project Connect Nashville? It has everything to do with us. We do long-term development work to break the poverty cycle through relationships, resources, and education in partnership with the local church. And woven into everything we do are opportunities for us to equip and empower the church to do the work of poverty alleviation along with us. A key part of what we do is to build healthy relationships with our clients while they're walking the long road toward hope and stability. We know that to get out of the tangled mess of poverty will include setbacks, and that they need encouragement along the way. What an opportunity for us and for the church to be walking alongside individuals, encouraging them and sharing Jesus with them. But how? Well, that's where the education piece comes in, which is really the key element of what makes us unique. We offer education that addresses areas of brokenness and creates opportunities for long-term personal relationships in the process. All our classes are taught by volunteer facilitators, and we invite volunteer allies to join the classes and build healthy and hopeful friendships with our students. The information in these classes is transformative across all areas of life. In the first year, we use 4 key curricula. Work Life is a 6-week curriculum that starts at Genesis 1 and examines how God has designed all of us in His image with unique gifts and abilities, and has given us the task of adding value to His world through work. Work's not a punishment of the fall, it was a part of God's original good design. From that point, the class moves on to examine overcoming past hurts and roadblocks at work, smart speaking skills, interpersonal relationships, healthy conflict, teamwork, meeting expectations, building a resume, knowing how to talk about your skills and experiences confidently, and then the class culminates with mock interviews with real employers who sometimes even hire the students. The second class, Faith and Finances, is another class rooted in the creation story, that the whole earth and all that is in it is God's. We are entrusted to care for it, so students learn to be good stewards of the resources God has entrusted to them and how to live simply and budget effectively while also paying off debt, saving, and being generous. Trauma Healing is a small group that teaches participants how to process their deep pain and creates space to ask questions about suffering in light of God's goodness. Students see and experience the God who is near to the brokenhearted and who binds up their wounds. And they learn about the importance of lament and the healing power of forgiveness for the hurt person, and that forgiveness can exist even if reconciliation does not. In this process and with this group, students are able to share their stories safely and find healing. The Story of God is an oral Bible study that walks participants through the grand narrative of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. Through the powerful stories in Scripture, they begin to see the grand arc of God's story and their own place in it. And when they realize God's redemptive work in the lives of people in the Bible, they see His power to redeem their own life. These 4 core curricula have a powerful impact, and the relationships built during these classes are a key part of the journey of hope and stability that people find at Project Connect Nashville. The final word I haven't yet touched on is resources. It's important to understand that someone who's committed to this life transformation, a new way of thinking, doing, and being in life, faces very tangible challenges in doing so, as we examined in the poverty wheel. So, we have connection managers that walk alongside our students and address those challenges one at a time, set goals, and check in on the progress regularly. For those who are enrolled in classes and doing regular connection management, we also provide rent reduction, where we pay a portion of their rent while they work toward living wage jobs, good stewardship, and healthy relationships. Our clients still pay a majority of their rent, and we know that this rent reduction doesn't solve all of their problems, but providing affordable housing through rent reduction for a limited time, it relieves the pressure and allows students to focus on wholeness and healing in all the broken areas of their lives. Due to the generosity of our donors, we've been able to provide rent reduction for up to 2 years, with a benefit that's stair-step down in the second year, while students go through second-level classes in work and finances, and the importance of healthy boundaries in relationships, and of knowing and telling their story. If I could emphasize one thing to summarize all of this, it's the importance of long-term relationships in poverty alleviation. In order to address all the challenges holistically, it is only possible in the context of healthy, long-term relationships. Relationships with Project Connect staff, volunteers, and with churches. As the church, the body of Christ, we're called to be agents of His healing in the world. And we as an organization believe it's central to the process that we educate, equip, and empower you to do the kingdom work of poverty alleviation alongside of us through your time, your talent, and your resources. So thank you for prayerfully considering how you may get involved with Project Connect.